Hello and welcome to our webinar, More Social, Less Distant. My name is Jeff Siegel, and our producer, Derek Bobella, is also helping facilitate technology. We appreciate his help. If the technology cooperates, we plan to send you all the deck with an audio recording after we're done. We're going to try and limit our comments to about 35 minutes, so we can leave as much time for Q&A as possible. Please submit a question if you have one, and we'll do our best to address it at the end. Let's get started. With physical isolation driving more people to social media than ever before, brands find themselves facing a defining moment. How do you meet your audiences on social with messaging that matters right now? And where do you start reimagining ways to forge closer connections for the future? That's the focus of this webinar, featuring two StudioNorth digital marketing experts. Senior Director of Digital Marketing, Tim Grant, will talk about targeting the present and future, examining recent shifts in media behavior, and introducing some strategies for navigating the next 12 to 24 months. Social media strategist Tracy Crane will discuss how to invest in listening, truly hearing your audience's concerns and challenges while building the trust and credibility you need to respond in a human way. With that, here's Tim Grant.
Hey, thanks, Jeff, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Excited to be with you at this moment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen as an agency as far as what types of dynamics are occurring in the digital marketing world, and really try to address this big, million-dollar question. What does it mean to market during a pandemic and a recession? Well, there's no real silver bullet answer here. I'll be clear about that before I get started. But what I want to do today is share with you some of the things that we've seen as an agency in the marketplace, and also some of the types of requests that we're seeing from our clients and how we've been able to help them during the pandemic and the recession. Like many things digital marketing, I'm going to break these down into three fairly broad areas. Content, meaning the messaging, the assets that we put out there. People, our target audiences, and places. Where online is our target audience, and how can we get our messaging and our content to them? Now, with that in mind, we do have some unique issues that we also have to face, right? As marketers, we're looking at significantly reduced, if not outright eliminated budgets. For many of us, we've seen a loss of business, and for some of us, we've seen a loss of a job, or our colleagues have lost jobs. So we're definitely looking at digital marketing through a different lens now. We've seen that some people have sent out their we're in it together email and have retreated from marketing altogether, waiting for times to get better, and they'll re-enter the marketplace then. But we've seen a strong number of companies out there that are recognizing that change is occurring, not just during this time, but we'll be continuing to see change over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. And so what we're really going through right now is we're looking through this new lens. We have to ask ourselves, how can we help our customers in this moment, right? Look, it's easy to retreat from marketing at this time. Some people think it's the safest way to go. But the reality is we need to market from a position of confidence at this time. This reminds me of a Winston Churchill quote that I love to use on my teenage sons, that fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. So as we go through these slides and we talk about some of the spaces online and the messaging that we're promoting, I want you to remember to market with courage, right? We have to recognize the change is taking place. There will not be a back to the way it used to be time again. We need to view this change, ride this change out, and continue to work as marketers, understanding that change will become the most commonplace piece that we have to work with over the next 12 to 18 months. So let's go back to those pillars a little bit that I talked about earlier on. Let's start with this notion of content. One of the things we're seeing in the marketplace is that brands are shifting from a sell type messaging to a more of a brand building with offers of help for their customers, right? We're seeing a lot of budget constraints, and where budget permits, we are seeing some shifts in how spend is being utilized. For example, there was a report out recently with the three big digital marketing platforms, Google, Facebook, and Snap, showing that while a lot of advertising investment has been on the decline, they have seen an increase in investment in direct marketing initiatives online. So it seems like people may be shifting some of that budget from the nurturing and awareness into more direct marketing initiatives where we're looking for more short-term or near-term results. In other instances where we've seen budgets reduced, we've seen a lot of requests to assist clients with their owned media, their websites, their blogs, their YouTube channels, things that they already have set up. And they're looking to build these things up during this time so that when we start to get people back into offices, when we start to see the recovery of our economy, that they will already be in the run phase from a crawl, walk, run out of the recession. And then, of course, we're seeing a lot of requests for different types of assets to deliver that messaging. But one factor that's very important, we see a lot of requests for assets that can be repurposed over multiple platforms. So think long-term video that can be, cut up into smaller segments that can be utilized on different platforms. And then, of course, don't forget about your remarketing messaging. It's very important that your remarketing messaging is aligned with your upfront marketing messaging so that we are giving that offer for help or promoting that offer for help on the places to the people that we want to see it. I think what's really unique about the requests that we're getting from our clients at this time around messaging is it's not just that they're looking for the right thing to say anymore. It's that they're looking for us to help them with the right thing to do. So in our mind as an agency, we're looking at how we can help our clients and helping encourage our clients to view how they can help theirs. When we talk about people in digital marketing, we're talking about our target audience. Now, we've never seen anything like this, as I mentioned earlier. There's been some significant shifts in audience behaviors, platform, and device usage. And so one of the things, once we've worked on our messaging and how we want to position ourselves during this time, we have to ask ourselves, is our audience targeting still optimal? For example, location-based targeting is really no longer applicable for most. Have we segmented our mailing lists and other audience lists properly for our new messaging? Okay. Are the audiences that we're targeting now the best decision makers to act on our new messaging and our new offers, given the changes that we've all been living through? When we talk about places, we talk about the spaces online where our audience spends the most time. And as you might assume or probably read, we've seen dramatic shifts in media behavior online. We've seen a huge spike in social media usage. We've seen spikes in messaging app usage, video consumption like YouTube and TikTok, people consuming podcasts, using their streaming services, music apps, and of course, established news sites. We want to take these shifts into consideration as we once again look at our audiences and make certain that we're getting our messages on the platform and the spaces online where they are spending time. In addition, we're also seeing some shifts in device usage. As you might expect, huge increases in smartphone usage, laptops, smart TVs, and media streaming devices. Now, why does this all matter? Well, one of the things that I would say is what we're starting to see and what we're starting to hear, and have a good example here of what we could be, of one study where 81% of U.S. consumers said that at least one of their current media habits or behaviors will carry on after the COVID-19 outbreak is over. So essentially, some of the changed digital behavior that we're seeing today is likely here to stay. So as we begin to reassess our messaging, reassess our audiences and the places that they spend time online, we need to remember that this is not likely just for today or the next few weeks, that it's likely to continue on for some time. So let's talk a little bit about what's next. All right. As marketers, what can we be doing? How are we assisting clients here and now in this moment? How are we starting to seek the light at the end of the tunnel and move our businesses towards that light? And I want to touch on a couple of things here for you and offer some recommendations. Some of the things that we're seeing in the B2B digital space, right? What we're really seeing is that what our customers wanted maybe 6 months ago is no longer what they need in the current situation, right? So the big question we have to ask ourselves when we're developing our new messages, reassessing our audiences and the places and devices that we target is, how can our company help our customers best in this moment? Number one, what message does your audience need at this time? Well, that's a tough thing to assess. One suggestion I'd make is start by listening to your audience. Find out the questions that they have. Now, I'm not going to go too deep on this one. My colleague Tracy Crane will be picking up on this topic in the next few minutes. This is a very important piece to your marketing messaging. Number two, develop media assets to effectively deliver your asset. Better understanding of your audience in current times and the places that they're spending their time online means that we need to develop assets that can be leveraged on those platforms to drive our message to our audience. Number three, get the most mileage out of your media assets. We talked about this a little bit a few slides ago, right? Develop media assets that can be repurposed. Long-form articles that can be shortened into shorter blog posts. Long-form videos that can be shortened into multiple segments that can be leveraged on different platforms. Number four, test new platforms to reach your audience. As I mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet here. We're all going through this together. It is unique time in history. We need to remember, as digital marketers, testing is part of our DNA. So we can't guarantee that we're going to drive to a particular platform or target particular devices in a moment and just assume that our market will be there. We need to test just as we would at any time that we're providing services or assistance for our clients. And number five, by the way, since we're talking about audience a little bit, there was a fairly big news article in January that I think kind of got pushed to the wayside by all of this pandemic and recession news that we've been dealing with the last few months. And that is that Google announced in January that it will be phasing out the use of third-party cookies in the Google Chrome browser over the next 2 years. And that's going to be significant for digital marketers. That is going to radically change the way we target and measure digital marketing. By the way, this isn't new. Google's actually going to be catching up to Firefox and Apple, whose browsers already block third-party cookies. So keep this in mind as you're building your audiences or working with your audience targeting over the next couple of months.
Hey, Tim, apologies for breaking in, but as we've seen, the situation these days can change on a dime, and brands need to be pretty agile. Where can they invest to get the most marketing agility and adapt to these changes?
Thanks, Jeff. That's a great question, and in fact, great lead into my next slide here. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing two dynamics here. We're seeing clients that have really narrow budgets at this time, and they're looking for quick wins, right? As B2B marketers, we're generally familiar with the concept of ABM campaigns, account-based marketing campaigns. And when you think about how we just talked about the three pillars of content, people, and places, it applies perfectly to ABM campaigns, right? ABM campaigns, force us to concentrate our sales and marketing efforts to a very targeted audience with a very specific and personalized message to that audience. It typically has some type of conversion metric. Maybe it's lead gen, or it's signing up for a webinar, for example. But ABM campaigns tend to be shorter in duration than awareness or nurture campaigns, and so they tend to be very focused and allow us to sometimes demonstrate some quick wins that we can share with our C-suite at our companies. So really, for B2B marketers, the hallmarks of ABM campaigns, I think, are are in line with what we've been seeing online, with the activities that we've seen, with the requests that we've seen as an agency for people that have come to us and said, what do we do now? It's a great time for ABM campaigns. Now, some of our audience doesn't have the luxury of budgets or large budgets. And so the request that we've seen coming out of that audience is focusing on what we call the long game. It's with regards to experimenting on more cost-efficient activities of our own owned media, typically with an emphasis on organic distribution. For example, now is a great time for us to be building our supply of blog posts. It's a great time to be refreshing our website copy, and of course doing both of those with a strong focus on SEO. It's also a great time for us to start working on some of those thought leadership pieces that we never seem to have at the ready when we're ready to start a campaign, right? So some thought leadership assets, white papers, videos, things like that, where we can demonstrate our expertise to our audience and share our message of help with our audience. And then, of course, organic social media, which my colleague Tracy Crane will talk about in a little greater depth in a few minutes. Not just promoting ourselves on organic social media, but engaging with our audience regularly on social media. It's a conversation, a two-way conversation, and an important one and a fairly easy one to get into at this time, especially if your marketing budget is being stretched. Now, I talked about a lot of things here, and again, just to reiterate, it has a lot to do with those core pillars of digital marketing: the content, our audience, and our online targeting, right? As I mentioned, as digital marketers, it's part of our DNA to always be testing, right? So continue to test conservatively. Look for the shifts in your audience based on the platforms that they spend time in and the devices that they're spending increasing time in, and start to test your messaging in those ways. So if there's two messages that I can leave you with here, it's very simple. Number one, as I mentioned, always be testing. And as I think Winston Churchill would back me up in this instance, market courageously. Thanks for your time. I look forward to addressing some of the questions you have in just a few minutes.
Hey, thanks, Tim. I know people will put a lot of these ideas into action. I see some questions have already come in for Tim. We're going to hold those until the end of the session, so feel free to send in more questions as you think of them. As Tim mentioned, social listening is going to be essential as brands decide whom to target and how to speak with them coming out of this crisis. To share her insights on social listening and relationship building, here's social media strategist Tracy Crane.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for the introduction, Tim. Great job, and thanks for the segue into social listening, which is one of my favorite topics to discuss. If anyone has worked with me or talked with me, I can go on for hours, but we don't have that kind of time. And one of the things I kind of want to preface too is that social listening and engagement is not a new concept. These have been around for a while, but I feel that they're really underutilized, especially in the B2B space. And I'm sure all of you have heard at some point in your career that the ability to listen, really effectively listen, is one of the most important skills that you can have. And as I was doing some of my research, I found some really great quotes to help kind of convey the messaging about listening that I wanted to share with you guys today. So this first one, the art of conversation lies in listening. And it really goes to the point that listening is both art and science. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through. The next one says the best listeners listen between the lines. So this one I love. Everyone has talked about or heard about reading between the lines. Now we're going to talk about listening between the lines. And this last one, if any of you are in sales or have been in sales or know salespeople should be familiar with something like this, that the best salespeople are great listeners, because that's how you find out what your buyers really want. So as we are kind of navigating this new normal or next normal, COVID, as everyone has heard, everyone is probably a little bit over hearing COVID and pandemic and crisis, but it is the reality, and it's had a really profound effect on the way we do business today, and it's going to continue on how we do business in the future. As Tim mentioned, nothing is going to go back to the way it used to be, and no one really knows what the future holds. But we can, we're sharing insights with what we've seen in our work with our clients. And, we really need to kind of mention how this COVID-19 effect has led to shifts in consumer behavior, and more people than ever are online. Tim already mentioned we've seen increases in things like media consumption, online entertainment, especially video, and social media usage. And what's happened is it's caused brands to really pivot to new ways of doing business and connecting with their customers like never before in very meaningful ways to offer support. So instead of running from it and hiding and retreating, like Tim mentioned, you really need to embrace this change and welcome this opportunity for a mindset shift. And another thing that this shift has really amplified is the importance of social media and having a social media program and why it's so crucial, especially in these types of environments. And here are 4 reasons why it's really more critical that you have some kind of social presence and plan. It's fast. Everything is coming out at light speed, and it allows brands to position themselves into those conversations in an appropriate way with the right message at the right time. It's direct. It really allows you to have those personal conversations and connections with your communities and your followers. It's a really powerful data source. You can aggregate millions of data points and use these insights to provide actionable deliverables back to the business. And it's a first touch point. Often people turn to social media to get updates about a crisis, or it's the first time they've even heard about a crisis, and use it to stay in touch. And it reminds me of a few years ago when we had those really bad hurricanes. We had 2 bad ones back to back, and a lot of people and a lot of companies were using social media to keep in touch with their family and friends, as well as their employees, to make sure that they were safe. So it's a really powerful tool to have in your arsenal.
Hey, Tracy, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned just now getting data from millions of messages. What
Yes.
if your audience is more limited and you have a lot less than that? Can you still make good use of that data?
Yeah, absolutely. It really, you can have a lot of data that you can get all sorts of insights and facts from and data points. But you also, depending on your audience and the conversations, even a small amount will allow you to draw some of those really good insights that can help you with your business.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great segue too into the next section here. And really, how can organizations adapt during this period of uncertainty and beyond, and develop these lasting relationships and help customers in, again, a meaningful way address their concerns and overcome these challenges that they may have never seen before? And that's by leveraging the power of listening. So where should you start, right? So start by building relationships with your communities. If you have your own properties on your social media channels, listen to what your followers are telling you. What are they saying in the comments? What are they saying if they're messaging you? What are they saying to each other? What kinds of conversations are they having? Next is to ask questions. And when you do ask questions, make sure that you are hearing your customers' concerns and challenges. And some people are actually a little bit afraid to approach this on social. They don't necessarily want to hear what people have to say, but you have to be prepared for the good and the bad and the sometimes ugly, so that you are able to make necessary adjustments so that you are meeting your customers' needs. While it may be a little painful to hear at times, it really, sometimes that's the best information to get, right? That's going to help you kind of progress. And when you do have these interactions, make sure you respond. And when you're responding, respond with empathy. Make sure that you are conveying that you hear what they're saying. And it's really important and goes a very long way in building trust. And what's really interesting, and I love this chart from Smart Insights, is that people are expecting responses faster than ever before. And the public has sort of been conditioned in a way to take to social media when they have an issue or a concern or a question, because they know it's a public venue. And it somewhat kind of forces brands to pay attention and acknowledge that, hey, someone's raising their hand and they're saying that there's something going on. So that's why it's so important, even just to acknowledge if you don't have the answer, that's okay. As long as you at least acknowledge that, hey, we hear you, let's have a conversation, that will go a really long way in building these relationships.
Hey, Tracy,
Yes.
one more interruption, if it's all right. I'm sure I'm not the only one looking at this chart and saying, wow, 37% of people expect a response in less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
How do you show a response and still stay on brand?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. It's really important that you are addressing any of these concerns, positive or negative, that are coming up, and do it in your brand voice. Every brand should have a voice, but again, it should be very personal. It shouldn't sound robotic, like it's a bot, right? But really, you're staying on brand, and then making sure that your brand messaging is also conveyed in a way that it isn't misconstrued in any way.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and that goes to the third point on building relationships, and that's transparency. Many of you have probably heard about it, that brands are, expected to be transparent, especially in times of crisis like this. And make sure that you're showing your compassion and vulnerability. It really goes a long way in building that trust and credibility with your customers, and it helps humanize your brand. And regardless of whether it's B2B or B2C, the lines have really blurred. In the end, you're talking to people. It's human to human interactions. So put yourself in their shoes and think about, what would you expect if you reached out to a brand that you work with or you follow, and really convey that we're all going through this together and we will get through it. And research shows that when you are transparent and show that vulnerability, that your customers will reward you. And these are some really great stats from a brand study that 86% of customers believe that transparency is more important now than ever before, and 85% of people are more likely to stick with a brand through a crisis if they are transparent. And I love this Edelman study. They do this great trust barometer study. And again, it translates, when you do take this time to build that trust and credibility, your customers will reward you. They will come to you first when they're looking to make a purchase. They're going to stay loyal over time, and they're going to advocate for you and defend you. And I've actually seen this in action in feeds, and it's really incredible when there are some naysayers out there, because they're there. You can't please everybody. But when you have your brand loyalists come in and defend you, it's really, that's the ultimate goal and the power of social and building these communities. So if you haven't invested in listening yet, now is really the time to get started. And it can be a really big undertaking. So what's important is you don't have to boil the ocean. You got to start somewhere. So before you start on this journey of the social listening program, there's 3 questions that you should answer. The first one is, what are you trying to measure? Are you trying to understand what people are saying about your brand or your offerings? Are you using it for research purposes? Maybe you're using it for crisis management or customer service. Second, what kind of data will you need? Here's where you would lean on your internal stakeholders to understand what are the key metrics or key information that will help them do their job better. So are you looking for conversation volume? Are you trying to understand sentiment? Are you trying to look for specific keywords or phrases that are indicative that there may be a problem or something may be a success? And third, how much data do you need? How long should you be listening for? And that really kind of goes to the first 2 questions. If you're looking for information on how a certain campaign performed, you may only need data over a few months. But if you're trying to understand trends or seasonality or something over a longer period of time, you may need months, if not years, worth of data to get those insights. So once you've answered these 3 questions, then you can start on the journey of finding a platform partner and a tool that is going to help you with this. And what's important here is a partner is going to help you hone your listening program further. They're going to help you understand what metrics you should be measuring. They're going to help you build these listening profiles and algorithms and further refine them over time. They're going to help you understand how to analyze the data, get out the noise, what's the actual information you're looking for, and find that relevant insight or insights that you can pass back. And that's really the most important thing, is you want to be able to get these actionable insights out of your listening data to pass back to the business. And another thing I want to mention, if you've done any research on listening, there are a ton of tools and partners out there, and there are available resources for every size and shape budget. So I'm not going to get into that too much right now, but just a little tease. I'm going to be addressing this in an upcoming blog post, so stay tuned for that. And then it's really important to understand what your customers actually say they want. So you may think that they're looking for X when in reality, they're looking for Y. And I came across this with a previous organization I worked with, where there was a new regulation that came out. It had specific deadlines and dates. And we put together all this information, and then we pushed it out through all the digital channels, and we're thinking we answered all the questions. Well, the social listening told us that, wait, no, there were some gaps. There were some questions that weren't clear. There was some information, additional information that was needed. So we were able to quickly provide that back to the business partners, create the information and materials that the customers are requesting, and then push it back out to market to be first to market and be top of mind. So it's really important to be able to listen to what they're saying and then turn around and give them exactly what they're asking for. And when you do that, deliver it to them in the formats that they use and interact with the most. So this is another great study from B2B Chief Marketer, an Outlook study that talks about what are the top form factors in the B2B space. And no surprise, that video is number 1. We know that video is booming. Tim mentioned it, and pretty much any article that you read, you see that video is really what people want. And in fact, there's some studies that are showing 72% of customers say that they learn more about a product and service when they do it through a video. So it's really important, more now than ever, that video is part of your arsenal. So I've gone through a lot. Again, listening is a really it can be a really big undertaking, but once you kind of boil down the basics and start there and you have a plan, then you can be on your way. So with all this in mind, I'm going to leave you with one final note that listening is not a set it and forget it. It is an ongoing iterative process that's going to evolve over time as your customer and business needs continue to change. So thanks everyone for tuning in. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jeff.
Thanks, Tracy. Really awesome stuff. And we've got a lot of questions that have come in. So I'm just going to dive right in. This one is, how do you automate social listening to hear what people are saying about your brand or company on social media?
Automate social listening. So that's a really good question. So part of it goes into building these different listening profiles and algorithms. So there's a ton of different ways that we can go about doing that unfortunately we don't have the time for, but I'm happy to chat with anybody on LinkedIn if you want to shoot me a message. But once you set up these different profiles, then you can start getting these automated reports and feedback in, and then further refine and hone them.
Okay, makes sense. Next, got one for Tim. We are new to testing. What are some examples of tests we can run ourselves in-house? And what should we be measuring in our tests?
Yeah, that's another great question. Thanks, Jeff. You know, I think one of the neat things about a lot of the advertising platforms that we work in day to day as digital marketers allow us an opportunity to test natively on those platforms. Typically, if we're looking to test, something, we want to only have one variable, right? That is, maybe we're going to put out 2 digital visual ads. We may want to use that opportunity to use the same visual backdrop, but perhaps test 2 different types of messages to see which one engages with our audience better. Sometimes it's the opposite. We go with the same message and we work on, what the visual backdrop to that ad is. On Google Ads, we can create 2 or more ads and have the platform run through the ads evenly so that we can discern which ones are engaging with our audience better. The tips I would give you if you're just getting started in testing is, remember, one variable. If you try to test too many things, you won't be able to narrow down to what it is that seems to be engaging with your audience better. Number 2, there are big and costly A/B testing platforms that are available for people that are doing this type of thing in a very aggressive manner. But keep in mind that most, if not all, of the advertising platforms that we use day to day allow some measure of testing for it. And then the last thing I'd say is this: A/B testing, remember, majority of the times, you don't always get a winner. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a winner. Keep testing. Keep finding the little nuances in every aspect of what you're doing digitally to see what's engaging better with your audience, and then push that forward in your future ads and messaging.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Hey, I just wanted to say we should have time for everybody's questions. So if you have one that you haven't submitted yet, feel free, and I'm sure we'll be able to get to it. This next one is for Tracy, and is transparency being truthful?
That's a good question, and that's something that gets asked a lot. And it is. It's being truthful. Now, it doesn't mean give away the secret sauce to your operations, but it does mean that if there's something going on, that you are transparent and truthful with your customers. I've seen a lot of brands that have done a really good job on social during this time, especially brands that have a brick and mortar presence that are saying, hey, we're not here physically, but we're going to adapt and do what we can. There's some other brands who have had to do a big switch with their e-commerce presence and online, and they're just not being able to keep up with orders and demand due to supply issues because of COVID. So it really is about being honest with your customers and being truthful that if there is something going on, and that can be simple as putting some messages on your website. I actually went and ordered something from DSW the other day, and it talked about 2-day shipping, but then it said due to the COVID, what's going on with COVID, that they may not be able to, meet that shipping need. So I thought that was a really great example to set that expectation with your customers up front, that so they know what's going on, and then that hopefully will prevent them from going to social media to complain because they don't know what's going on. So communication is really key.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting answer. This next one comes in as a jump ball for Tracy and Tim. How do I show the value on these ideas to my CMO? I'd be courageous and increase our budgets, but ROI is critical. So who wants to jump at that one first?
I think I've got the height advantage, so I'll go first.
That's a fact, yeah.
I think this is a big reason why the study I mentioned earlier, that we're seeing a lot of companies that do have budget to do some form of marketing, that they have really kind of backed away from the awareness and nurturing type marketing efforts and really have gone into direct type marketing formats where there is some type of immediate engagement so that we can bring results directly to our C-suite, right? And so the concept of an ABM campaign, again, we're going to have a desired outcome there. And these are going to be shorter. We're looking for near-term results. We're looking for that conversion. And so that's one of the elements I think that has been, that we've seen on the rise quite a bit. And even in our own email, I see a lot of this type of activity targeting me and people that do the things that we all do, right? So I think that's one way, and there are other things that I think we need to demonstrate. This is a time to educate the C-suite about how these different efforts work. I'm always amazed that, we will talk about an awareness program, and then a few weeks down the road, we find out, well, where are our conversions? Well, they're not going to come from the awareness part of the marketing efforts. And so we're looking for quick wins. It's the same with companies that are limited on budget. This is where I would say, hey, whenever we want to talk to somebody about creating a campaign, we're going to talk to them and say, okay, what type of assets do you have that we can use to encourage people to download that in exchange for their information for lead gen, or developing a webinar like this that's topical and to the point where we can do that and get people to sign up. So there's a little bit of an education piece about what our efforts do, what the outcomes are, and how long that we can expect those outcomes to take, right? And so I think that there's that piece to it. And then the second piece is that where you can create campaigns or campaign opportunities that are going to get some type of immediate reaction from your audience, that you can bring those numbers back to your C-suite, that is the best way to do it. So again, these are the shifts we're seeing. And again, I think these shifts are happening because people are in the same boat as our questioner here, saying, we got to show ROI hard now. Trace, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up. And I would just add that going back to kind of the responsiveness in social media and some of what you can find from these listening insights is really good insight to share as far as, with C-suite. It's saying, hey, here's what our people are saying. Here's how we can adapt and pivot in a quick manner and then get that back out. And I think while you may not see an immediate direct ROI to that, I think conveying the kind of the funnel, the path of your customer journey and getting them to understand that we're meeting their needs in ways that maybe our competitors aren't. And I think that is also another great way to demonstrate the value.
Great. Actually, here's one for Tracy that sort of follows up on that. What are some things we can do to improve our results with organic social versus investing in paid social?
That is a really great question. And there's been the organic versus paid debate for a very long time. And organic is really, where you can build these relationships and, develop these long-lasting customer friendships almost through your communities. So it's where you can have these one-to-one conversations on a personal level and really get to know who your followers are, who are these members of your community. And what happens then is kind of what I talked about earlier with building that trust and credibility, where they're going to defend you and be loyal, is they're going to help you share your messaging. So if you put out some great content that they're asking for, they're going to say, yeah, this is great stuff. I trust this company, and they're going to share it with their networks. So you get that additional amplification factor through your organic communities that you may not necessarily get if you're paying for a click or a share or that type of thing.
Jeff, I would just add in on that, that in general, when Tracy and I talk to our clients, we generally tell people at a very high level that when you're leveraging organic social media, you're speaking to your existing audience, right? When we get requests to increase the size of those audiences, that's when we have to kind of move over to the paid side, if you will, right? The reach of organic messaging is not as great as it once was. And so, again, to something Tracy mentioned, a few times throughout a presentation, it really depends on what your outcomes are. And that's how you would, you would choose. Or it may be an educational process that, you have to bring back to your C-suite. To help them understand that, hey, we're not going to create a whole new community of new members simply by promoting ourselves organically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one last thing to add to that too is I think it also goes to what your goals are. So, there are certain elements in the organic versus paid. If you're trying to acquire new audiences, then yes, as Tim mentioned, paid is certainly a great avenue. But on the organic side is where, people have already raised their hand and they're following you. And so they want to hear from you. So leveraging that.
Okay. More complicated than it sounds, right?
Yes, it is.
All right. All right. So Tim, you had to know this one was coming. Once Chrome, what data will be available for targeting?
I think I opened a can of worms there, and I'll just like Tracy, I'll say, hey, if I really got you off on that tangent, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and be happy to have a conversation with you on the phone sometime. So two areas that I think are essentially important. The first one is this: first-party data will always be available. I shouldn't say always, but will remain available to us at that time. And by first-party data, I mean data that we as companies own. So think about, I used to do a dog and pony show about digital marketing, and I would tell people, the gold standard in digital marketing is an opt-in email list that you have grown through your own business, people that want your messaging. That is a targeted audience. That's an engaged audience. They're receiving your messaging and they continue to interact with it. So any type of first-party data that you have for your business, you'll always, or for the time being, you'll be able to market towards. I think where we're going to see limitations is going to be, we are going to be able to get less focused on individual type attributes. We'll be focusing more on broad demographics and broader psychographics that are applicable to our audience and the things they do and the places that they visit online and those types of things. But you will see, even on platforms that you'll continue to leverage, you will see that the ability to narrow down some of that targeting is going to disappear over time.
Okay. Maybe we should do a blog post on that.
Sounds like a plan, Jeff.
Sorry, shameless self-promotion. Okay, Tracy. There could be conversations in the room I've never even heard of. How do I know which channels to focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really interesting once you start doing your listening to find out where these conversations are actually happening. And that's really where you're going to get your answers. So by having this great listening program, you're going to start to see all these places around the web that you've never heard of where your customers are gathering and having conversations. There may be some great forums or some other types of communities out there that you didn't know existed. And it's understanding kind of the volume within each of these communities. There might be something that's a one-off somewhere, so you have to see if that's an anomaly or if that's something that's kind of leading to something that could be bigger. So once you start getting all this great data from your listening program, you can start to see by volume what are these different platforms and channels and sites that are having these conversations, and then you can prioritize those and know where to focus your efforts.
Okay, great answer, great answer. That is all we have time for. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for coming. And we will be doing more of these webinars, and we intend to keep them all free just so we can help you as much as possible. In fact, I just wanted to say when we started planning this webinar, we actually had 3 speakers. We were going to have our executive director of video share his views on video. But after our first run through, we thought it would be better. That could be a webinar in its own right. So that's going to be probably one of our next webinars. So please watch your for an invite over the coming weeks. Now, if all the technology cooperated, we'll be able to send you a recording of the full deck. So look for that as well. We look forward to continuing to help everybody. Please stay safe and stay healthy. From everyone at StudioNorth, thank you very much.